So in this video I'm just going to be talking about a particular year of my life, 2009, which is one that had a very distinctive feel to me for a number of reasons. Not for anything that was in the cultural zeitgeist at that time or anything, but just for me on a personal level and how my life was at that time. So 2009, so I'm able to put exact dates on what was perhaps the most miserable time of my life so far. That was the 12th of February 2007 when it began, and it ended on the 21st of August 2011. So it was a period of about 4.5 years. And what was happening during that time was I had a job, the worst job I've ever had in my entire life, something I wouldn't recommend to anybody really who doesn't like being in the freezing cold all day for 12-hour shifts, doesn't like being shouted at in foreign languages that you don't understand, and doesn't like having to start work in the dark and finish work in the dark, like I had to in the wintertime during that period. And this job was in a food factory. It was like a chicken factory. We made ready meals for a shop. It's a high-end supermarket in this country called Marks and Spencer. And it was like, you know those foil pots that you get with a pre-made meal in? It's got a clear film on top. You just poke some holes in the film, put it in the oven, and you cook it, and it's there ready for you. We made a variety of those kinds of things in this factory for Marks and Spencer. Ready meals, they're called. And I worked there, like I said, for 4.5 years. And it was the most soul-destroying, morale-crushing, miserable time I've ever had in any job. And I've had some really crap jobs in my time, but this one takes a cake. Anyway, so we're talking about 2009, and that was kind of the halfway point through this job that I had, this period of my life. I'd done about 2 years working there, and unbeknownst to me, I still had a further 2.5 years to go. In 2009, I was 19 years old for the first half of it, and then 20 for about the second half of it. My birthday's in May. And I'd been working there since I was 17 years old. And what my life consisted of back then was doing shifts it was like a 2-3-3-2 shift pattern. So I had 2 days in, 3 days off, 3 days in, 2 days off, and it would go on like that. And on my days off, my days when I was at work, it was a 12-hour shift, starting at 6 a.m, finishing at 6 p.m. I was absolutely exhausted afterwards. I was basically just finish work, go home, and collapse on my bed. And before I knew it, I was awake again, and it was time to go back to work, 6 a.m. the next morning. The days off I had were mostly comprised of playing the Xbox 360 and World of Warcraft, which were my, Gears of War was my game of choice back then. I'd played a lot of Fallout 3, it had come out the year before, that's my favourite video game of all time. Fallout New Vegas hadn't come out yet, and for some reason I had become kind of fixated on Gears of War. It was like a routine of mine where I would just play that game a lot, throughout the day. Mostly during the daytime. And I've recently tried playing Gears of War again on the 360 just to, when I go around my brother's house, he's still got his Xbox 360 and Gears of War. And we played it a bit, but it's funny how when you go back to an old video game, you realise just how clunky and how difficult it is, where you get used to the new controllers and they're so much more precise and delicate and sensitive. And you've got a lot more control over things, but in the old ones, it's like, you nudge the joystick a tiny bit and he basically does a 180 and aiming the wrong way. It's weird how I didn't realise how difficult it was back then, but, Anyway, I was playing a lot of Gears of War on the 360, and in the evening times, I would basically not do very much except I would watch Family Guy DVD box sets that I had, and American Dad as well. I would drink copious amounts of Green Goblin cider, which is very nice. I've not had it for a while, but that was my drink of choice back then. I was 19, so it was still a novelty to me to be able to go and buy alcohol for myself, because it's the age to where you can be served alcohol in a supermarket in this country is 18. So it'd only been about a year where I could go and buy my own booze, which was kind of cool. Still, it was... I still felt guilty while I was doing it. It felt like I was doing something naughty. And the other thing that I would do is I would spend a lot of time on this forum. It was a depression and anxiety forum, first and foremost. And it had a name. It was called takethislife.com, which even at the time, I thought that was kind of a poor choice of words for the name of a depression forum, Take This Life, because to me it sounded like Take Your Life. But, I think the idea behind the name was something like, take this life and do something positive with it. But the way it came across to me was take this life, take your life. But yeah, maybe that was just my pessimism rearing its ugly head. But I'd be on there a lot. I'd post on there quite a lot. I'd post about my day. I'd post about how I was, really miserable in where my life was at the moment, the routine I was stuck in, and the soul-crushing monotony of my job, standing on an assembly line all day in, I think it was close to 0 degrees, the temperature in that place. It all had to be, we were dealing with raw chicken and raw meat, so it had to be cold. It was basically working inside a gigantic fridge, and a very cold one as well. And while I was posting about my issues that I was having, I began to kind of run afoul of the people who ran the forum, because I was unhappy with having to work with so many people who didn't speak a word of English, or if they did speak English, they were too ignorant to speak English to me. They would just assume that I was like Polish or Lithuanian or Latvian, whatever. And I was always having to say to people, can you say that in English, please? And they would, but, it was a huge hassle for them. I'm in England and I'm expected to speak English. God, this is such an inconvenience for me. Yeah, that was the attitude. And I tried bringing it up with my supervisors and managers and stuff. They would feign some sympathy, but they weren't particularly interested. And I wasn't the only native person working there. By the time I left, there were only about 4 of us left. When I started, it was probably about half and half. And when I posted all this on the forum, I got some finger wagging from people. That's so racist. So, I couldn't really speak my mind. I had to be very, careful about how I worded things on there, because it was kind of my only outlet for, speaking my mind and trying to tell people what my concerns were. And an effect that this job had on me, because by the end, there was basically, it was me and, you could count on one hand how many other English people were there. And having started this job at the age of 17, I was still developing. My brain was still growing, and, its form was still being determined by, the outside factors and things like that. And the thing is, because I found myself around so many people who didn't speak English or spoke broken English, barely had a grasp of it, I was always having to simplify the way I spoke. And I couldn't use big words, I couldn't use highly contextual terms that obviously a native speaker would understand, but, they didn't understand it, so I couldn't use those kinds of things. And my vocabulary, by the time I finished there, it was absolutely dire. I was almost speaking broken English myself, because I was spending 12 hours a day in these places with people who didn't speak English, and then I was on my own, for the most part, on my days off, and not really speaking to anyone. I had a friend at the time who I worked with, and we hung out sometimes, and there was my family, obviously, because I was living with my parents and my siblings back then, obviously at the age of 19. So I had a very strong sense of the fact that the way I was living and kind of being forced to live at that time was extremely unnatural. I was being made to work, 12 hours a day in horrible cold conditions, around people that I could barely understand and they couldn't understand me. And I went onto the forum again, and I posted again with obviously very limited language. I kept it PC, so as to not get kicked off of the forum entirely. But then another user on the forum, a Latvian guy who was living in England, went onto the forum, and he wrote this really, really long post about how much he hated living in this country. He said he didn't like the people, he didn't like the general way of living, blah, 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 blah. He didn't like it here. And he went off on one, like, big time, really being harsh, not mincing his words at all. And I took issue with this, obviously. And so my reply to him, it wasn't particularly aggressive, it wasn't particularly confrontational or anything. It was a simple question. I said, I can't remember the exact wording, but the basic gist of it was, if you hate it here, why do you live here? Why don't you live in your own country? And of course that got all the all the do-gooders. They all came, an avalanche of people piled on me saying, oh, you can't say that, oh, that's so racist, blah, 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 blah. And, I said, well, he's written like 10 paragraphs here, absolutely railing on us and this country, and that's totally fine. But I ask a simple question of why, if he doesn't like it here, why does he live here? I'm the one that gets absolutely piled on, dog piled on. It's crazy. So, things weren't that different on the internet back then to what they are now. It was rules for some and different rules for others. Let's just put it that way. And like 2009, that was, you had like the proto SJWs at that time. It wasn't like the rise of the SJW. I think that was like 2012 or something. This was a few years before that, but they were still there, and they were still kind of in charge of forums and websites and stuff like that. And you had to toe the line and not say anything naughty. Well, this question that I asked was beyond the pale as far as they were concerned, and I was promptly kicked off of the forum. I'd been posting on it for I don't know, probably about a year by that point. It was kind of a big part of my life, weirdly. It's kind of sad to say, but it was a place where I could talk to people and make my concerns heard, obviously in not particularly explicit language, but, I could kind of say what I wanted to say to an extent. Some people were sympathetic, but the people who ran the forum were not. As far as they were concerned, I was picking on this poor foreigner. And so I was booted off the forum, and that was that. I couldn't go back on. Obviously, if I used a new email, set up a new account, I could, but I was kind of embittered by that experience, so I didn't want to go back to it anyway. So that happened. So once I didn't have the forum anymore, I didn't really have anywhere where I could voice my concerns. I couldn't really, I could talk to my friend who I worked with, and he felt pretty much the same way. I could talk to my brother as well, but I don't know, that it was very disheartening to lose that avenue of where I could, be kind of among like-minded people that were struggling in their lives and stuff like that. So I'd lost that. That was gone. So all I had left by this point was the Xbox 360 and World of Warcraft, and getting drunk on Green Goblin cider most nights. I'm watching Family Guy and American Dad and South Park DVDs. That's pretty much what my life consisted of. And it's a weird kind of time to be nostalgic for, because it was horrible. It was a horrible job. It was a very isolated existence that I was living, and I didn't really have any outlets left to speak of. I tried some new forums, ones related to mental illness, depression, stuff like that, but they were never as active as this one. This one at the time, it was like the forum that everybody would find. If you Googled it, depression forums, that's the one that had come up. The other ones were, you know, they weren't as jam-packed. You know, there was always somebody on this one. There was always people around. You would always get replies to your posts. And yeah, it really sucked to lose that, to be honest. But that's the way it goes, isn't it? You know, you speak a few wrong words and it all gets taken away from you. And my concerns were valid concerns, perfectly sensible concerns. You know, what good is it if you work somewhere where nobody can understand what you're saying, or you can't understand them? You know, don't ever let anybody tell you that just having a bunch of people from all totally disparate places, all jammed together in one place, is a good thing, is a strength. You know, it's not. It's not. It's a very weak and shaky foundation to build anything on. You know, so if anybody tells you that it's a strength to just have loads of different people from different places who don't understand each other, all crammed into the same place, they don't have your best interest at heart. You know, that's just a bit of advice for younger guys who maybe, you know, they get force-fed all this stuff all the time. Don't believe it. It's not true. But yeah, 2009, it was a strange year for me. It was a year of losing something quite important to me, something that was a big part of my life at the time. And when I look back, 2009 to me is a dark bedroom, the glow of the television with Gears of War playing, the glow of my laptop on my bed with the Depression Forum, and, you know, the taste of Green Goblin cider in my mouth, and also Family Guy, South Park, or American Dad DVDs playing as well in the background. And it's funny how certain times in our lives, they can all usually be summed up with a few items, or a few, maybe something that you watched or something that you played, or, you know, there was a lot more to it, but that all kind of gets filtered out. Like, there's more to that time period, but you just remember a few of the good things. So, yeah, it's kind of a weird video, this one. It doesn't exactly have broad appeal, does it? Talking about 1 year in my life, which was, 17 years ago? But it's just a time period that sticks out in my mind. It's one that I'm sort of nostalgic for, even though it sucked ass, frankly. There's a few other time periods that came after that as well, that, you know, which I might make another video about, maybe, if I feel like talking about it at length. But yeah, I'll see how that goes. But anyway, yeah, kind of a weird video, like I said, but just something I wanted to talk about. I just wanted to exercise these memories that I've got of that time. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. Thanks for watching, thanks for making it to the end if you did. Yeah, leave a like, comment, all that YouTube jazz if you want to. Yeah, I'll see you in the next one.